Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The taste of him was violence and expensive whiskey, a chaotic blend that should have terrified me, but instead, it set my blood on fire. I didn't kiss him out of love. I kissed him because I wanted to die on my own terms. The rain lashed against the cobblestones of the alley behind the St. Kerr Conservatory, drowning out everything but the pounding of my own heart. I was cornered, my back pressed against the rough brick, my shirt soaked through and clinging to my shivering frame. Looming over me was Cashin Blackwood, the uncrowned king of this academy, the heir to an industrial empire, and the man who had made the last 3 years of my life a calculated, living hell. He had his hand slammed against the wall by my head, trapping me, his eyes dark pools of malice that usually signaled the destruction of my sheet music or a cruel remark about my scholarship status. But tonight, I had snapped. When he leaned in to whisper another threat, I didn't flinch. I grabbed his lapels, pulled his towering frame down, and crushed my lips against his. It wasn't a soft press of affection. It was a collision, a desperate, angry seal to prove that his torment meant nothing to me. I pulled back, chest heaving, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "Do your worst, Cashin," I spat, my voice cracking but defiant. I don't care anymore. I expected a fist. I expected him to wipe his mouth in disgust and have his bodyguards throw me into the gutter. Instead, Cashin stood frozen. The rain slicked his raven hair across his forehead, water dripping from his high, aristocratic cheekbones. His eyes, usually sharp and mocking, were wide, the pupils blown so large they eclipsed the slate-gray irises. He slowly raised 2 fingers to touch his lips, tracing the ghost of my aggression. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face, not the cruel sneer I was used to, but something hungrier, something darker. "You don't care?" Cashin whispered, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating through the small space between us. He stepped closer, invading my personal space until I could feel the heat radiating off his bespoke suit. "You just made a fatal error, Julian. You've just proven you care enough to try and break me." He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "Run along, little pianist. But know this, you just opened a door you can never close again." The next morning, the St. Kerr Conservatory was buzzing with the usual cacophony of tuning violins and operatic warm-ups, but the atmosphere felt heavy, like the air before a lightning strike. I kept my head down, clutching my binder to my chest. I was Julian Vane, the charity case, the unseen shadow in a school of peacocks. Usually, my mornings involved dodging Cashin's entourage, avoiding the cafeteria where they might trip me, and finding a secluded practice room before they occupied them all just to spite me. Today, however, the Red Sea parted. As I walked down the main marble corridor, students stopped talking. They pressed themselves against the lockers, eyes wide, whispering behind their hands. My stomach churned. Had Cashin told everyone? Was this the final humiliation? To be outed as the boy who threw himself at his tormentor? Then I saw him. Cashin was leaning against the door of my first class, Music Theory 4. He was immaculately dressed in a charcoal turtleneck and black slacks that accentuated his long legs, looking like a model ripped from a dark fashion magazine. As I approached, terrified but refusing to show it, a senior student, a lineman from the rugby team who often joined Cashin in mocking me, stepped into my path to shoulder check me. "Watch it, Stray," the guy grunted. Before I could brace for impact, a hand shot out. Cashin had moved with the speed of a viper. He gripped the rugby player by the throat, slamming him against the lockers with a deafening clang. The hallway went dead silent. "Did I give you permission to touch him?" Cashin asked, his voice calm, conversational, and utterly terrifying. The guy choked, clawing at Cashin's hand. "See, Cashin? It's just Vane. We always." "Things have changed," Cashin said, tightening his grip until the guy's face turned a blotchy red. He leaned in, his eyes cold and dead. "If anyone looks at him, speaks to him, or breathes in his direction without my permission, they answer to me. Am I clear?" He released the guy, who slumped to the floor, gasping. Cashin smoothed his jacket, then turned his gaze to me. The darkness in his eyes from last night was back, swirling with that intense, possessive hunger. "Julian," he said, his voice like velvet over gravel. He held the classroom door open for me. After you. I walked past him, trembling, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had thought the kiss was a shield, a way to end the game. I was wrong. It was an invitation. I hadn't pushed him away. I had just become his sole focus. For the next 3 weeks, my life became a gilded cage. Cashin was everywhere. When I sat at the piano in the practice wing, he was there, sitting in the corner, legs crossed, reading a book, but watching me over the rim of his glasses. He didn't mock my playing anymore. He just listened, his gaze heavy and physical, tracing the movement of my fingers on the keys. When I went to the library, the seat across from me was reserved. When I ate lunch, a gourmet meal from a private chef appeared at my solitary table, and no one dared approach within 20 feet. It was suffocating. It was intoxicating. Why are you doing this? I finally snapped one evening. We were in the Grand Hall. I was practicing Rachmaninoff for the upcoming Winter Gala, the most important event of the year where scouts from the Vienna Philharmonic would be present. Cashin was leaning against the curve of the Steinway, watching me. Doing what? He asked innocently, though his eyes gleamed. This. The protecting, the staring, the obsession. I slammed my hands on the keys, creating a discordant crash. You spent 3 years making me wish I didn't exist. Now you act like you own me. What is the game, Cashin? Cashin stood up and walked around the piano. He trapped me between the bench and his body, placing his hands on the keys on either side of my hips. He smelled of sandalwood and rain, a scent that was becoming alarmingly comforting. I don't play games, Julian. I play to win, he murmured. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I flinched, expecting pain, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. I bullied you because you were the only thing in this godforsaken world of plastic smiles and family expectations that felt real. You were brilliant, poor, struggling, and yet you had more dignity in your little finger than my father has in his entire empire. His expression darkened, a flicker of self-loathing crossing his face. I hated you for it. I wanted to break you so you'd be just like the rest of us. Miserable. Hollow. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. But then you kissed me, and I realized, I didn't want to break you. I wanted to be the only one allowed to touch you. That's sick, I whispered, though my hands were gripping his shirt, betraying me. That's not love, Cashin. That's possession. Is there a difference? He asked genuinely, his lips hovering over mine. I'm a monster, Julian. You knew that. But now, I'm your monster. Before I could respond, the heavy oak doors of the hall creaked open. Cashin. The voice boomed through the hall, shattering the moment. We sprang apart. Standing in the doorway was Lord Silas Blackwood, Cashin's father. He was a terrifying man, a titan of industry with eyes colder than his son's. Beside him stood a woman I recognized from the tabloids, Isabella Vance, the daughter of a shipping magnate. Beautiful, sharp, and Cashin's arranged fiancée. Father, Cashin said, his demeanor instantly shifting to ice. He stepped in front of me, shielding me from view. Stop playing with your charity case, Silas sneered, walking down the aisle, his cane clicking against the floor. Isabella is here to discuss the gala arrangements. You are to play the opening duet with her. It will announce the engagement. My blood ran cold. The engagement. Of course. Cashin was royalty in this world. He had duties. I was just a temporary fascination, a glitch in the matrix. I'm not playing with Isabella, Cashin said evenly. And I'm not announcing any engagement. Isabella laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Don't be difficult, darling. You know how this works. You have your fun with the help, and then you come home to the legacy. She looked at me over Cashin's shoulder, her eyes filled with venom. Cute thing. I can see why you kept him around as a pet. Get out, Cashin growled. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Excuse me. Silas stepped forward, raising his cane. I said get out. Cashin roared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. He grabbed my hand, interlocking our fingers. I am playing the gala with Julian. And if you try to force this marriage, I will burn the company's stock to the ground before the market opens on Monday. Do not test me, father. You know I built the algorithm that runs your logistics. I can destroy it in a heartbeat. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Silas looked at his son, then at our joined hands. He saw the resolve in Cashin's eyes, The unhinged determination of a man who had finally found the one thing he wouldn't trade for power. You will regret this, Silas spat. He turned on his heel. Come, Isabella. Let him ruin himself. They left, leaving us alone in the echoing hall. My legs gave out, and I sat back down on the piano bench. Cashin turned to me, his face pale, but his eyes burning. You risked your inheritance, I said, stunned. For me? I told you. Cashin said, kneeling between my legs, looking up at me with a reverence that took my breath away. I'm obsessed. Without the money, I'm just a man. Without you, I'm nothing. The night of the winter gala arrived with a vengeance. The conservatory was draped in velvet and crystal, the air thick with perfume and judgment. I was terrified. Not only was I performing the most difficult piece of my life, but I was doing it alongside the man who had just declared war on his own family. As we waited in the wings, I noticed something wrong. My sheet music was missing. In its place on the stand was a shredded pile of paper with a note. Know your place. Isabella. Panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't play Rachmaninoff from memory, not under this pressure. I turned to Cashin, hyperventilating. My music? It's gone. Cashin looked at the shredded paper, his jaw tightening until a muscle feathered. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. He simply took my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. Julian, look at me. His thumb stroked my cheekbones. You don't need the paper. You've played this piece 1,000 times in the dark, when you thought no one was listening. I was listening. I know you know it. Your soul knows it. I can't, I whispered. You can't, he said firmly. Because I will be right there turning the empty pages for you. I won't let you fall. Trust me. The stage manager signaled us. The curtain rose. The lights were blinding. I walked to the piano, my legs feeling like lead. I sat down. The silence of the audience was oppressive. I could see Silas Blackwood in the front row, arms crossed, waiting for my failure. I could see Isabella smirking. Cashin stood beside the piano, his hand resting on the wood, his presence a fortress. He nodded at me. I closed my eyes. I thought of the ring. I thought of the kiss. I thought of the way Cashin had looked at me when he risked everything. I channeled the fear, the anger, the passion into my fingertips. I began to play. The first chords rang out, strong and defiant. I didn't open my eyes. I let the music pour out of me, a torrent of emotion that silenced the room. It was aggressive, it was sorrowful, it was beautiful. Every time I reached a crescendo, I felt Cashin's presence, his energy anchoring me. When I hit the final, thunderous chord, the vibration shook my very bones. I sat there, chest heaving, sweat dripping down my back. For a moment, there was total silence. Then, the applause erupted. It wasn't polite, it was raucous. People were standing. Even the scouts from Vienna were on their feet. I looked up at Cashin. He wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at me, a look of such naked pride and adoration that it made my heart ache. We walked off stage, and the moment we were out of sight, Cashin pulled me into a darkened alcove. He didn't speak, he just kissed me. This time, it wasn't me proving a point, and it wasn't him taking possession. It was a promise. It was two broken jagged edges fitting together perfectly. You were magnificent, he whispered against my lips. We have a problem, I said breathlessly, resting my forehead against his. Your father is going to come for us. Let him come, Cashin said, a dangerous glint returning to his eyes. I have the one thing I wanted. I've spent my whole life being the villain, Julian. I don't mind being the villain a little longer, as long as I get to keep the hero. He kissed my hand, his lips lingering on the knuckles. You proved you didn't care, he murmured, referencing that night in the rain. But now you're mine. And I will burn the world before I let anyone touch what belongs to me. I looked at him, my bully, my tormentor, my protector, my lover. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. His obsession was a heavy weight, a dark tide that threatened to pull me under. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to swim to the surface. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf, by realizing the wolf was the only one willing to bite back. If you enjoyed watching Cashin burn his legacy to the ground for Julian, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you trust a love born from obsession, or is Cashin too dangerous to keep? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,